Cool. Thank you so much for all of you guys for joining, and thank you, Anurag, for coming here. I have a few words of introduction for Anurag before we get started. First of all, welcome everyone again to Splash and Evolve. I hope we'll do more episodes. We've actually stopped doing few episodes for a while now. I hope this is the start of the second season and not just one sporadic episode, but let's see. But yeah, it is a pleasure today to invite Anurag or Verma ji, as we sort of call him, in our personal circles. I've known him for almost a decade now, and we both started. There's a common starting point for us in our career that we were both part of the Make My Trip marketing team before both of us moved to product. Verma ji at that time used to take care of SEM for Make My Trip, which was of flights, I think, largely. So the very big area of growth for Make My Trip at that time. After moving into PM, I think he took care of mobile product for a long time, and then had stints with InMobi and then Hotstar, where he was the director of product. And now he's back to home ground, which is Make My Trip. Again, he's leading the mobile product for Make My Trip, along with some strategic initiatives. So basically, in my understanding, his PM expertise, and you guys, it's all for you to see as well today, but he has very strong expertise in ad tech, which will not be much of a focus today, but also building platforms and then growth, right? As a PM, those are the areas that he has really worked on, and his work together from analytics to marketing and then product sort of stitches that journey very well. And therefore, I felt that he would be the best speaker to speak to us about the general topic of growth, right? Product-led growth has this lot of misnomers. So what does it mean? So when I saw the deck that Verma ji had created for a different talk, and went through it, I really felt that it would be very useful for our team here to get a very broad-based basic understanding of what product-led growth entails. So that is what the topic is today. Verma ji will take us through a 360-degree coverage of what all generally falls under the gamut. And I'm sure all of you are working towards a certain part of the growth, but today's session will probably tell you how that part is fitting into the larger growth loop or the growth journey, right? So yeah, that is my hope and expectation from this session, which I'm very sure it will be met. And with that, Verma ji, it's over to you to sort of present and take it forward.
Uh, and like, just to call it out, like, I actually forced Ashish to basically set up this session for me. I'm like, talk to ready okay, now I want like forums where I can talk about it, right? So just calling it out. And yeah, like Ashish calls me Varmaji, I call him Dua Saab. So that's like our own personal sort of monikers for each other. So I'll just give me a second to just
Meanwhile, keep your cameras on, folks, and please do ask your questions as and when you come across it. We'll try to keep some time towards the end, but I think it will be useful for us to keep the session interactive.
just bring up my screen. Hopefully it's visible now, the screen.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I think I ended up choosing this topic multiple reasons. First, like there was like a junior of mine who had moved on to a different organization. He wanted also to sort of have someone speak about growth. But one very big reason of basically choosing this topic was one of the Twitter threads that I'd seen from Ashish earlier, which was around product-led growth. And I felt that maybe that's the topic that is actually really important across multiple organizations. I felt that maybe I should try and take a stab at it, right? So what I'm trying to do is basically cover the entire gamut, bring in some more personal examples, as well as also talk about examples from other organizations that I've seen in the past who have successfully managed to do it, right? So quickly getting started, like obviously like the customary slide on what my background is, which Ashish already covered, right? So I'll just skip over it. Right. And the way I've structured this talk is basically first talk about some of the output metrics, right? what do we look at, and why is it important for the organization, right? And then talk about what really influences these output metrics, right? So so let's say you are like the product lead or product head at like a startup, right? Or looking after growth, or maybe you are the CEO of the organization who is fairly hands-on with product, right? So, and let's say you're looking at this chart, right, which is basically so on the x-axis you have the time scale, right? So these basically represent months, and the y-axis obviously you have monthly active users in thousands, right? And let's say you are looking at this number which is like steadily growing up, right? So so at this point of time, should you be happy, should you be unhappy? How would you figure out what is going to happen after month 12, right? How is it going to play out in month 13, 14, 15, 16, right? And that is what you are in charge of, right? If you are leading growth, or if you are like if you are like the founder of the company, right, founder of a startup, right, this is something that keeps you up at night, right? So how would you figure out what is going to play out in the future, right? So let's try and see how we can, right? And this is what it is, right? So at month 12 things are looking nice, right? Everything is like a curve that is going upwards, but you don't know what is going to play out in the future. Maybe you peak out at some point of time in the future. At that point of time you start declining, right? Maybe you're looking to raise money, right, from investors. Maybe you are looking to drive growth in a very hyper competitive market, right? So you don't know what is going to play out, right? And so the first story is obviously like a story that is played out multiple times with a lot of startups, right? And the second story is basically the happy story, right, where you are sort of steadily growing, continue to grow, right? Right. So understanding the questions, right? Is it working? Will the growth sustain or peak out in the near future? And is there a way where we can basically influence this graph and basically, you know what, get to a point where you go from chart A, the first one, to actually a happy story, which is chart B, right? And these are not easy questions, right? It's tough to go from A to B if you are in position A, right? And we'll look at examples as to how we could do it, right? Please feel free to interrupt me in between if you have any questions. Happy to take them as we go. Right. So the first part is just understanding this graph itself, right? What are the different components of this graph, and what really influences the shape, right? So what you have is basically on the top, you have basically what is playing out in any time period T, right? Which is like you have some set of new users, or maybe you have some reactivated users who are basically entering, they're basically coming onto your product in that particular time frame T, in that particular month, in that particular, maybe you're looking at a fortnightly view, right? So in some time period T, you basically get some users again, right? Some of those are new users, and some of those are users which you have basically reactivated from your existing user base. At any period, you're losing some users, right, which are basically going inactive, and that is the net MAU gain or loss you are getting in that particular time period, which is the top half, right? And then you have, in the bottom half, you have a steady sort of engaged user base uh, that is there and probably is continuing to grow, right? So you have some sort of steady number, and then you have a number that you are sort of gaining or losing every particular time period, and that basically becomes your entire monthly active for that particular period, right? So this is what we refer to as the growth accounting equation. Like, it sounds like a fancy equation, but all it says is you have a steady base of X, and then you are adding something or losing something based on how your new plus reactivated buckets and inactive buckets are playing out, right? And that basically leads to the final sort of monthly active user number for that particular time frame. So moving on. So let's try and understand how the new plus reactivated, that entire story plays out typically, right? Like in any typical organization, right? So what are the channels, right? So either you're getting some users, new users through paid, right? Or you're getting some new users through SEO if we are talking about like websites, right? And maybe potentially even the apps, if you have app indexing and all enabled. Maybe you are able to get new users by basically driving growth from your existing user base, right? So you already have certain set of new users, and you're able to somehow use those users to basically get more users, right? And the classic example is a referral, right? So if you have a fairly big base, this is something that can definitely work for you. And then reactivation obviously is basically customer lifecycle management. Maybe you're sending out notifications, maybe you're sending out beautiful emailers, maybe you have a newsletter, right, which basically brings the user back. If you're a content based product, you have a beautiful monthly newsletter that brings the user back onto the platform, right, in any time period, right? Let's talk about the nature of the curve itself, right? So what happens, right? So typically this curve, right, what actually happens is in the early parts, right, when you are starting this journey, what happens is you get a decent nice slope, right? Because maybe you are starting out paid, right? So you are reaching out to a target segment, right, which is not completely capped out, right? Most of these users probably have not seen your product. You are starting off in the first, and maybe, and if your economics are working, will start out pretty well, right? So it will start off with a gentle, nice slope, right? But at some point of time in the future, right, the growth will start sort of flattening out, right? The slope of the curve changes. It becomes harder and harder to get more and more new users, right? Maybe because a lot of you users already have that app installed, right? Or maybe the if what I call as crowding out, right? So if let's say you have a good target segment where the economics are working out, what will happen is a lot of other players will start targeting the same segment, right? Which means the economics of the channel will start going a little bit awry, which means that you will get less scale of folks from that particular channel at that economics what you were getting earlier, right? So the typical nature of this curve is it starts reasonably linear and then starts flattening out. Now looking at the inactive component, so this is like what is happening. This is the second component of the net map. So what happens? Inactive basically will lag your monthly active users. So if you have a monthly active user curve, some percentage of those users will start getting inactive in any time period, right? And this is slightly different from the other curve. So in the other curve, you start with a good slope and then you start flattening out. In this curve, what happens is you start off with a gentle slope, right? So the slope is actually slightly flat at the beginning, because until unless you have an install base, right, how many users can you sort of lose, right? So initially, when your install base is small, you have less users to lose, right? So initially the number of users that you lose in every time frame will be small, but as your user base grows, it becomes harder and harder to kind of keep the engagement rates high with that user base. So as your user base grows, this curve starts sort of the slope starts increasing very, very rapidly, right? So as you invest more and more and get more and more sort of growth and get more and more users, the other part of this equation starts becoming really hard to sort of keep up with, right? Which is like a lot of those users you start losing in every time period, because it's hard to keep up with the engagement rates of the platform, right? Your early adopters are typically your most vocal supporters, right? But then you start reaching out to other segments, right? Then you start reaching out to other target markets, and as you scale more and more, the nature of the curve is such that you will typically start a higher percentage of your users you will start losing in every time frame, which is why this curve plays out this way, right? So you look at inactives as a percentage of actives, obviously. uh, uh, Standard examples, right? Lack of frequent use case, right? In make my trip and travel, we struggle with this a lot, right? Real estate is another example. Once you have, let's say, bought a property or rent a house, you are out of the market, right? In a lot of these cases, this is hard churn. It's very hard to sort of move this curve, right? So when do you hit your peak MAUs, right? So this is the fun bit, right? So when do you hit your peak MAUs, right? Because you have a steady engage base, so that kind of stays with you. Maybe it is creeping up slowly, but the point at which you will hit your peak mouse is when what is happening is you have a certain inflow, right, in terms of the new and reactivated users, and then you have an outflow in every time period, which is the number of users who are becoming inactive in every time period. So your peak mouse is when you're basically outflow starts becoming equal to the inflow. So initially the outflow starts small and slowly it starts ramping up, right? And as you grow your user base, your outflow starts becoming the curve starts becoming really aggressive, and the slope really increases really fast. And on the other side, your other curve, which was the inflow, it started off really well with a decent slope, but slowly starts flattening out. So at some point of time, the outflow starts becoming equal to the inflow, and that is the moment when you hit your peak mouse. After that, what happens is any attempt to sort of grow the user base further, you will not be able to grow the user base, will actually start leaking users every month from that time period, right? So that is what I was referring to in the first graph, right? So this is the point. So month 16 is when the sort of the inactive user base, inactive number starts catching up with the new plus reactivated number, and from that, or maybe month 17, and from that point onwards you start seeing a decline, because from that point on you're not able to get as many users into the system as you're losing every month, right? So that is when you basically peak out. Cool. So we understood the equation. But the problem is all of these stuff, right, that we called out in the growth accounting equation, all of these are output numbers, right? So how many users you are able to get into the system every month is an output metric, right? It depends on so many different things that you're doing. Right. Similarly, how many users you are losing every month again is an output metric that again depends on a lot of things that you're doing well or not so well, right? So in some sense, these are not actionable for product teams, right? So you can look at the components, you will know exactly when you're going to peak out, right? Whether there's a problem, whether there's not a problem, maybe you are peaking out immediately, maybe you are peaking out in a distant future. So you will know there is a problem, but you will not know what to fix, right? And how to get to the solution, right? Because these are all output metrics. So, so far so good. Any questions, any comments? Okay, cool. So I'll just assume that things are okay so far. Right. So let's look at all the individual buckets, right? So we have three buckets. We have users we are getting into the system every time period, which is new. What are the different acquisition channels? What are the different loops that are working for us? Then obviously there is a reactivated bucket. So new plus reactivated. There's an inactive bucket, and then there is an engaged bucket, right? So new is basically completely dependent on the acquisition channels or the other sort of acquisition loops that you have built in. Reactivated and the number of users who are you are losing, which are becoming inactive every time period, depends on the engagement channels, engagement loops. And obviously there's a steady engaged user base that also depends on the engagement sort of flows that you have built on your product. So what are the questions to look at when it comes to acquisition channels slash loops? Number one, what are the channels through which we are acquiring new users, and are these durable, right? Will they sustain for a fairly long period of time? They're not going to sort of get saturated or get peaked out in the near future. Are there other new channels that we can basically try out to basically get new users? Is there a way we can unlock a completely new market, a completely new target segment, which might be adjacent to the current user segment that we are focusing on, right? So that helps unlock a completely new sort of target market segment, and we can sort of set up new acquisition channels loops to acquire those. Is there a way we can use our existing user base to acquire new users, like the classic example, like the archetype example that I called out, referral? And is there a way where I can make use of current user behavior, right, on existing platforms? For example, one example of that platform network would be WhatsApp, right? Is there a documented user behavior on WhatsApp that I already know, or maybe there's a documented user behavior on YouTube that I already know? Maybe I can lean on that and basically build something, right, which basically helps me grab more users, right? Because the users are already there on those platforms, right? So is there a way I can build something in my product that can help me grab some of those users, right, and basically bring them onto my platform, right? So yeah, so let's look at examples of some classic loops or some acquisition channels. So one of the classic loops or acquisition channels is obviously this entire construct of SEO. But SEO sort of paired with UGC works really, really well, right? And there are a lot of companies that have done this really well. So how does the loop work? Obviously, the users looking for content, right? And some of these users are new users. So you basically rank. If you rank well in SEO, some of your links come up. So some of these users or new users will find your content. Some of these will go on and basically sign up and then basically start creating content themselves if you have invested well in a UGC loop, right? And then And then once some of these users start creating content, obviously this like you have like a content generation engine that is working for you without you investing a lot of efforts. You have basically enabled your users by giving them the tools. They create that content, and then the search engines will eventually index that unique content, and that will basically again serve again a fresh set of users looking for content, right? So that is how beautifully the loop works, right? And it's while it's a very hard problem to crack, but there are a lot of companies who have done this successfully. So obviously Wikipedia is one, right? A non-profit example. Then Goodreads is a great example. Like if you go to the search engine, be it Google, be it Bing, and look for like good books to read, right? In any category, be it fiction, non-fiction, leadership, health, education, anything, right? Invariably you'll find a Goodreads link, right? And a lot of these recommendations are coming from users who are using the Goodreads platform, right? They are recommending their books. Maybe they're flaunting their status, right? How many books they have read, right? Maybe they're genuine sort of users who love books, right? But ultimately, the platform Goodreads is able to you harness these users in a big way, right? And because I'm in travel, obviously I had to put in a travel example. So TripAdvisor is like the behemoth, the classic example of how like you could use UGC successfully to basically fuel growth, right? So like if you look at travel, effectively TripAdvisor ratings and reviews is like the de facto standard, right? A lot of users actually start out with TripAdvisor if they have to figure out which hotel to go to, right? Or which destination to visit, right? So TripAdvisor is basically in some sense the starting point, right? A lot of users don't even go to Google, they basically go to TripAdvisor, and that is where they start, right? So one loop is that. A second loop, which a lot of you might find surprising, is the paid marketing loop, right? And you might say, how is paid marketing a loop, right? So I'll just try and address that question. The way this works is you basically run campaigns or ads. New users click on those ads. A percentage of those sign up and basically try out your product. Some percentage of those basically become paying users, convert and start generating revenue, which basically gives you additional firepower, additional budget to basically start buying more ads, right? And again, giving out some examples. So Uber, when they were looking at the entire growth journey and they're still very aggressive for growth, they used to invest a whole lot in paid marketing, right? A lot of money Uber used to spend globally, right? To basically acquire a lot of users, especially in APAC, in China, right? So Uber is the classic archetype example of spending a lot of dollars to basically fuel growth. Amazon is another example. If you go to Google search and look for any particular product, invariably you will see an SEM link from Amazon, a search engine marketing link from Amazon. And again, just to sort of complete that story, again, a travel example, booking.com. So booking.com is one of the highest spenders on Google SEM. A lot of their traffic actually comes from investing into paid marketing. In fact, booking.com used to have like this unsaid rule of not doing TV campaigns. They typically they are a masters of making the digital channels work for them, right? So again, this is how paid marketing works. And just sort of going into this example a little more deeper. So you might ask the question, right? Like as a PM, how do I contribute to this loop, right? This is something that paid marketing, like by definition, you think about it, you think that, hey, paid marketing is something that the marketing team controls, right? So what is it that you do as a PM to basically convert this into a sustainable loop, acquisition loop for the company, right? And this is an example that basically shows that, right? So imagine that imagine that the economics of paid marketing, right? I'll take an install example. So let's say let's consider make my trip, right? So let's say the marketing team comes to me and tells me that, hey, the best cost per download that I can do on, let's say, Google Play Store ads or Apple search ads, right, when they're trying to drive installs, is $50, right? Because a lot of this is based on how many other players are basically trying to cater to the same user, what kind of bids are being like pushed by your competition, right? So let's say the marketing team comes to me and tells me that, boss, I cannot get you a cost per download less than 50, right? Like 50 is the absolute bare minimum. $50 is the absolute bare minimum that I can do. I cannot go below this, because below this I start becoming uncompetitive with respect to the marketplace dynamics. a lot of other competitors basically start crowding me out because they are, maybe they're flush with VC money, maybe they have raised a round, right? So I start becoming uncompetitive on the Play Store ads marketplace, right, where other bids start crowding me out, right? And let's say post install, within 30 days your new user conversion, two scenarios, maybe you have maybe you are at a 7% number, or maybe you have put in some work and you have basically managed to bump your conversion to 9% number, right? So your effective cost per order, right, because so within 30 days you're able to convert the user to 7% success rate. So your effective cost per order effectively becomes, you get every user at 50 rupees, but then you are able to convert only 7% of those users. So your effective cost per order basically becomes 50 rupees divided by 7%, which is 714 bucks. Let's say in the case of Make My Trip, I make, typical booking is flights, right? So let's say my average revenue per order is 600 rupees. So is it working? Not working, right? Because at 7% D30 new user conversion, your effective cost per order is 714 rupees. The money you are making is 600 rupees. Effectively, you are losing money even though you have acquired the user, right? So the economics is not working out for you. Getting the user is not helping you, because for every booking you make, you are basically losing money, right? So not only you lost money to basically get the new user in, you did not, whenever he made the booking, you did not even recoup the money that you basically spent on acquiring the user, right? So is it working? No, right? If you had put in the work and if you have put in the work, you have bumped it to 9%, your effective cost per order goes from 114 bucks to 588 bucks. Now your average revenue for per order is 600 rupees. Is it working? Yes, right? So that is how you are able to contribute. You are basically responsible for making sure as a PM that your paid marketing loop is actually working. You're actually generating revenue dollars from the users that marketing is acquiring for you to be able to fund that growth, to be able to sort of complete the loop, use that same money to basically get more sort of users and run more ads, right? So yeah, whether paid will work or not as a durable channel is heavily dependent on the product manager. More examples, using existing user base to drive growth, right? So classic example, so let's say new users have come in and basically signed up on your platform, right? And maybe you are a content-based product, maybe you are a product that the user really values, right, and wants other users to know about it, right? So send out invites to friends, right? Some percentage of those users, some percentage of those invites get clicked on, right? So you have someone who is basically sharing the content, and then someone who is basically clicking on that content, and then eventually some of these users basically click on the links, engage with that invite content, and then eventually end up signing up, right? Because they like the content, what they like, what they see, right, and eventually end up signing up, right? So again, some good solid examples, right? So let me give you a content based example. So it's not just about referral, right? A lot of content based products can smartly drive their user growth based on their existing user base, right? So if you have heard about this app called InShorts, right, which is like a curated news app, which basically sends out, which basically has a summary, 50-word, 100-word summary of the important news articles of the day. If you see the sharing flow that they have enabled, every time they share, every time you go on InShorts, right, you like something and you share it on WhatsApp, you'll always notice that the content that is getting shared, there's a link in the content snippet, there is a link to basically download the app, right? So when you're sharing the content, they have made sure that when you share the content, there's always a download link down at the bottom, right? And that helps them basically, so obviously when you look at the content, you become curious, right? And then you basically click on the app, and then you end up on the play, you click on the link, and then you end up on the Play Store or the App Store, and you end up installing the app, right? So referral is not the only sort of example of using existing user base to drive growth. Works very well for content based products, right? Dropbox is a like I had to put in a global example. So Dropbox is a beautiful example of how you can use referral to basically drive growth. Dropbox, as probably most of you already know, is basically a file storage sort of company, right? So they give you like whatever MBs or GBs of storage to basically store and upload your files online. So before sort of Google Drive basically started becoming the norm, Dropbox was actually the big gorilla in the market, right? So So what Dropbox did was like a fairly successful referral loop where anytime you would sign up, right, and you basically uh, get onto Dropbox, be it a free plan or a paid plan, they will tell you that hey, you can get maybe 100 MBs of storage more if you refer 10 of your friends, right? And everyone values storage, right? That's something that currency really works, right? So what people started doing was they started sharing the Dropbox product with their other friends, right? That hey, you come on, you also get some storage, right? So you get the free plan maybe which has like 200 MB, 300 MB, maybe a GB of storage, right? And then you get additional 20% on top of it. So the referee who is getting the link also gets additional benefit. Maybe he gets another 200 MB of storage, and the referrer who is sharing, he also gets the benefit, right? So the loop beautifully works as long as there is a currency that works well for both the referrer and the referee, right? Or maybe the referrer and the friend, if you would want to understand it that way. It works really, really well, right? Travel example, more sort of closer to home, right? So this was done by GoIbibo even before they got acquired by Make My Trip, but they did it very, very successfully, right? It went to a point where like uh, basically Go Contacts and Go Cash became the identity of the company, right? And what it said was, if you are a GoIbibo app user already, you can sync your phone book, right? And which basically means you can sync your phone book, and then basically you can refer GoIbibo to all your friends, all your contacts in your phone book. And for every user who basically comes onto GoIbibo and basically books something, the referrer gets rupees 50, right? And that's like pure hard cash, right? And maybe there's some smartness to basically cap the amount of money a referrer can make. Maybe it is capped at 20 successful referrals or whatever. But this worked very, very beautifully, so much so that GoCash practically became the identity of the company and actually drove a lot of growth for them. Questions, comments?
Uh, Hi, Anurag.
Yeah.
So just wanted to know what's a good industry standard for percentage of people who actually come to the product once, like their effort.
So I'll give you some very recent numbers. So we have revamped the referral program for Make My Trip all over again. What I'm noticing is like the refer rate could have been better, but if you have a decent enough sort of reward for the referrer, you can see very good successes, as much as like probably 10 to 15% of your user base actually referring your product to other users. And from there, what I'm noticing, at least the current numbers that I'm noticing on my platform, is once you have, let's say, shared 100 links, about 15 to 20% of those users are clicking on those links and becoming fresh new users, right? So you can say 15% of your user base referring your product is really good. Anything better than that, like Dropbox, would be amazing. You can look at the Dropbox numbers, that was like really, really healthy, maybe upwards of 30%. And then once the link is shared, 15 to 20% of those users actually clicking, 15 to 20% links getting clicked and basically converting into new users, I would say is a pretty decent good outcome.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool. So moving on to the next example, right? So this I kind of called out in the first slide as well, is let's say you are stuck, you're stuck with respect to growth because you are only catering to a certain sort of segment, right? Right. So the one way to basically find growth is basically unlock new user segments, right? So I'll give you a very good example, right? So here there's Practo, right? And Practo, we know, is basically in doctor consultation, and then they slowly expanded into pharmacy and lab tests, etc., etc. But the example that we want to call out is basically this, right? Which is, so Practo was already there in the market, was probably there in the market since, if I remember correctly, maybe 2009-10 time frame, right? And they were catering to this user who was probably like pretty online savvy, right? Most likely a tier 1 user, because who does doctor consultation online, right? Your typical thinking is that hey, a tier 1 city user who's pretty savvy and online would be using doctor consultation, maybe find read ratings and reviews of doctors, right, on an online platform, right? And this is what happens, right? And my upchar comes in, right? And my upchar focuses completely on the semi-urban sort of user segment, right? Comes in much later, right? So maybe my upchar started coming becoming a phenomena sometime in 2018 time frame, if I'm not mistaken. And within 2 years, right? So if you look at the two products, right, pretty much exactly the same. Find doctors, video consultation, medicines, lab tests, surgeries, ilaj, dawaiyan. If I hope all of you get Hindi, right? So bimari, diseases, consultation, and basically getting treated, medicines, and other kinds of verticals, right? And then yoga and fitness and women, right? And video consultation, right? Aapka apna doctor, right? Pretty much exactly same space. But it never struck practo that doctor consultation and access to doctors is such a big problem, right? And more of a problem in like semi-urban areas where you don't have access to good doctors, and everyone wants to lead a good life and have good health, right? And my upchar comes in much later, right? And within 2 years goes from a million page views, is like a snapshot from a newsletter that I subscribe to, right? From a million page views to a month to 12 million, right? And this is what I meant when I said that you can get growth by actually thinking very deeply about new user segments, right? And that, like, I look at my upchar as like the classic archetype example, right? Like I really rate them really highly, because everyone used to say that it's very hard to build products for tier 2 and actually build products where you can actually monetize them. My upchar has actually gone out there and done. uh, Another example, another way of growth is basically finding adjacent use cases, especially in cases where it is very hard to, you know what, the repeat use case is less, right? For example, the real estate example, which is why I've chosen real estate, right? And that's something that I called out earlier. So in real estate, if you have to find growth, and given that you know that it is hard to maintain user retention simply because the repeat use case behavior is not there, right? Once you have bought something, you're out of the market. Once you have rent something, what, you are out of the market. So how do you get growth, right? And how do you get more and more users or your monthly actives to grow, right? The only way to do that is basically, you know what, build more adjacent use cases, right? Like when I look at housing.com, and not that the other real estate players don't get this philosophy and they have not built something like this, but if you go to housing.com, you find that everything is basically like they have this nice sort of label saying housing edge, and they have thought through the entire full stack, right? Like whenever you're thinking real estate, what is the possible spectrum of use cases, right from inception all the way to the end, right? What all you can think, what all problems the users might be facing, and they have built products to basically cater to everything, right? So they have a parent use case that the platform serves. They have a rent agreement. Obviously, getting a rent agreement done is a big pain point. Home loans, right? Home interiors, solar rooftop, packers and movers, rental furniture, property management, right? So this is how you get growth, right? You think of more credible, uh, durable use cases that basically builds in more occasions for the user to use your product, right? And that is how you get better retention, right? You have more use cases, which means you can monetize these users better, right? Maybe the same users coming to you for paying rent and also getting a rent agreement done, and maybe also trying to use your platform for home loans, which means you can drive better ARPU from these users, which then basically helps you complete the paid loop, right? Because in paid loop, the economics of your channel will depend on how much ARPU you are able to drive from this user, right? And by building more adjacent use cases, not only you are basically getting better retention of the users, but you are also giving yourself an opportunity to basically improve your ARPU. And once you improve your ARPU, then your marketing gets an opportunity to basically invest more and more into the paid channels, right? Which helps you unlock maybe newer user segments, maybe more expensive channels, etc. and etc. Right? So this is another example. And then there's something that I called out, right? So one thing I called out in my earlier slides is you basically go to platforms where users are already there, right? And this is this is something that this was not done during my time frame. This is something that Make My Trip did really well when I was not around. This was between my first and second stints, which is basically they understood that getting train PNR status, like in trains, understanding what the final availability is a huge challenge in trains. I'm not sure any of you now travel by trains, but trains is basically the de facto transportation mechanism in India, right? And so it's a huge supply demand gap, right? So there's only so much supply, there's so much demand. 30 million, like you'd be amazed, like 30 million travelers travel with trains every day in India, like not during COVID time, but prior to that, right? And still, like trains are running, like there's this entire concept of waitlist, right? And once you book a train ticket, you're not sure whether you will get to travel or not, because you might be on the wait list because the train is already completely booked, right? So there's a legit use case, a very genuine use case, and then you pair it with a platform where users already are, which users find it very comfortable to use. And so MakeMyTrip build this product where you can get your train status on WhatsApp business APIs, right? You just put in your PNR number, you put in your PNR number, you get your status, what's the status of your booking, or you put the train number and you get the running status, right? Because a lot of trains in India actually run pretty late, right? Especially in winters. It's again very legit use cases powered with a powerful platform where users already are, and you start seeing very good numbers, right? And so MakeMyTrip build this offering, and like at its peak, I know they were getting almost like 100,000 users a day, right? So this, and you can, and if you look at it, you, if you notice, MakeMyTrip has very smartly put in the app download link also, right? For any other information is exactly what InShorts does as well. For any other information, please visit applinks.makemytrip.com/info, which means you will be able to convert a fair percentage of these users into app installs, hopefully like regular users. Then they start getting your other products, right? They look at your other products and they start figuring out, oh, you probably have bus tickets, bus bookings as well, right? And maybe at some point of time you graduate to maybe booking a domestic holiday as well, right? Or maybe you start booking at least a standalone hotel. Maybe you are going to Puri, or maybe you are going to Indore, or maybe you are going to Jhansi, right? And that is how you start getting more users onto your platform, start basically getting them to book something on your platform, and hopefully get some ARPU out of it. Not a product example, but I wanted to show this example again. Like this is also, this works very well in a personal sort of situation also, right? A personal use case also. So this is a guy I follow on Twitter, Daniel Vassallo. Very smart, very capable, used to be an ex-Amazon engineer, right, at a fairly senior level, and then he quit, right? And the reason I put out this example is because he figured that he first needs to uh, basically go get onto a platform where users are, build some kind of a following, and then he start building products to these guys, right? So this while it says joined March 2009, he actually became active sometime in 2019 timeframe. So within 2 years, because Twitter obviously has a lot of users, within 2 years he built a following of 100,000 followers. And now by peddling content products to these users, because he figured that Twitter is the right kind of audience, right? So it's not just about go where users are, it's also about where do you find your kind of audience, and figured that he's talking about a lot of tech stuff. He writes a lot, he's an ex AWS expert, right? He used to work on the AWS team, and AWS is a hot topic, right? So he wanted to build content products on AWS. He figured that Twitter is the right platform where he will find his kind of audience, right? He built out a following by posting organic content, right? Regular content, he's talking about his learnings, etc. He built a following, and now he's been able to, within 2 years, he has been able to hit a $500,000 number, right? Which is not a trivial amount of money by any stretch of imagination. A lot of startups are not able to raise that kind of money. He has managed to sell content products worth $500,000 by by basically peddling his content products, right? Maybe a bad word, but basically putting out his content products for this audience, and because they value his knowledge based on all the different organic stuff that he has shared, they basically buy, and this is the kind of revenue run rate that he has been able to generate. And so this example basically talks about like figuring out a genuine legit customer pain point and going out and solving it. This is something that I actually built out. Didn't work because IRCTC eventually sort of capped us out. They said that you cannot do this. But I felt again, so because I'm fairly close to trains, my father used to work for Indian Railways. I know it's a massive pain point, like being on the wait list and being on the tender hooks until the last minute, right? And today the way that sort of structure works is, right, you basically book, right, you end up paying money, right? So let's say you are booking like like a train ticket in the AC category, right? Air conditioned category, let's say 2 AC, right? End up paying $3,000, right? So let's say I book, let's say Delhi, uh let's say Delhi, Calcutta, right? And I end up paying 3,000 rupees, and still I don't know after paying 3,000 rupees, 4,000 rupees, whether I will eventually get to travel or not, right? And that's a huge pain point, right? So what we decided that what we'll do is basically you basically book now. So it's like paying money to get into a queue, right? Which is entirely stupid, right? You're not even sure whether you will get to travel at the end of it, right? So you have put in 3,000, 4,000 rupees, you're still not sure whether you will get to travel at the end of it. You're still sort of scampering for alternate ways to travel, right? So why even pay money to get into the queue, right? So which is why we launched this product which said book now, pay on confirmation. You can book any waitlisted ticket, you don't have to pay any money, right? And at the end of it, once the ticket, only when the waitlisted ticket becomes confirmed is when you pay the money, right? So you understand the customer pain point, and you build something that caters to this pain point. Maybe the best product for this scenario would have been guaranteed travel. You don't you book a waitlisted ticket, and I guarantee that you get to travel by bus, or maybe in some cases flights as well, right? So that would have been a probably more sort of legit product to solve this use case. But we felt that maybe that's way too much of a leap of faith for Make My Trip to do that, right? So basically someone is booking a train ticket and I basically upgrade him to flight would have been very expensive for the organization. So we ended up building something like this. And not joking, we used to do I think when we launched this product, we used to do around 3,000 waitlisted tickets a day, right? Immediately jumped to 4,500 tickets a day. So that was like a 50% jump within a week, within a week, right? A lot of, and I called up a lot of users myself, and they said the only reason I booked waitlisted ticket on this is actually the sister brand GoIView. The only reason I booked the waitlisted ticket on GoIView was simply because I was getting this flexibility that I have to pay only on confirmation, right? A lot of you will say that, hey, that's stupid, right? Why take on the credit risk, right? So we had done some maths, right? So this was more like an experimental launch, and then to understand how many users actually pay up. But imagine you have a different kind of version, right? So in this version, you book at zero and pay $860. But let's say you have a different kind of version where you pay, let's say, $60, right? And you pay the rest of the money, right? So you have also gotten the user to get a skin in the game, right? He's paying you some money, right? Which means you have enough confidence that this guy is a legit user. He's not going to just book the ticket and run away, right? So we had safeguards, right? For example, we could cancel the ticket if the user was not paying up, right? But another variant could have been like book at 60 and pay the rest of the money when the ticket gets confirmed, right? So this, like I was 100% sure that this will be a beautiful growth lever. Just the only problem was, which I knew back then also, that if I launch something like this, IRCTC will come in and stop us, and that is what ended up happening. But for the time frame that it was live, we were actually we saw really good traction and growth, right? So another example. I hope we are doing okay on time. It's yeah,
Yeah, we are fine.
I think we are fine. Another example, find an existing consumer trend, right? And just like piggyback on that, right? Just go kill it, right? So, uh, so gaming is like with mobile devices coming in, right? And like with everyone having like access to a device that can basically where you can play games, right? Early on, if you had to really play games, actually had to get yourself a desktop or a laptop, which was pretty expensive, right? With mobile coming in, basically the barrier to entry start becoming like went down really quickly, right? And and basically not only are people playing games, like the good interesting insight is, and that is why like a good PM should always have his eye on the latest and greatest consumer trends, is not only are people playing games, there are other people who are watching these people play games, And that's the fun bit, right? It's become like a social experience. Like, I will play game and then I'll live stream myself, and there are hundreds and thousands of followers that will basically watch me play a game, right? And maybe even mouth a bunch of obscenities, right? So right, and that is what is playing out, right? So that is why, like gaming becoming a social phenomena has like become such a big consumer trend, that 2020 is YouTube's gaming's biggest year, 100 billion minutes of watch hours. Like, that's crazy number. That's a crazy number, right? And actually YouTube was YouTube was actually late into the game. It actually started with Twitch, right, which is a very popular live streaming platform in the US, right? And so gamers were playing games, and then other players were basically tuning into watches, and like crazy levels of followership, right? And so you have a consumer trend, right? What do you do, right? So if you're a product guy and you're smart, right, what you will do is you will figure out a way to basically get that into your own product, right? To basically amplify that social angle, right? So this is what Helsinki based Amplifier did, right? So they built out an SDK. They were like they were earlier focused on some other version of gaming vertical, right? But then they figured out that, hey, gaming has become such a big social experience. Why don't we build an SDK that will? So let's say here is a game studio, right? So think of a game studio, a game that you know, right? So Angry Birds, right? And Rovio Games, which is the game studio, right? So Rovio Games already has a lot of players playing Angry Birds, right? What Amplifier did was they felt I can build out an SDK, right, that Rovio Games can integrate into their app, right, in their Angry Birds game, right? What will happen is then it will become very easy for the end user to basically capture his gameplay footage, right? So Anurag is playing Angry Birds, which has been published by Rovio. Rovio basically takes Amplifier's SDK. Amplifier has built an SDK which makes it very easy for Rovio Games to basically integrate like a capturing of gameplay footage and sharing it with friends, right? And every play became such a popular SDK. Every gaming company started integrating their SDK. So much so that within, like, I think uh, from the time they launched, within like 12 months, they had like 6 million registered users, right? And then at some point when they were adding 1 million new users a month, because there was just so many game studios, right? Because game studios figured that like having this kind of sharing is very important, because people will play, they will share their footage, then other curious users will come in, they'll say what is this interesting footage of which game, right? And then they will click on it and they'll start installing the game, right? So game studios use this loop to drive their user acquisition. Every play built a product for them so that they could do it very easily in their games, right? And this is where the amplifier's smartness was, right? To actually understand that gaming has become a social sort of phenomena. I can build a product that makes it easy for game studios to integrate like a social phenomena within their games. And I have a link down below that you guys can probably watch at leisure, which actually shows how Amplifier's SDK does this, right? Where you basically play, you capture footage, then it becomes very easy for you to share videos, right? And other users basically start grabbing it. Okay. Right. Yeah. So I think we are done looking at the examples, right? Product growth examples. Now let's look at so those examples were macro examples, right? I was calling out examples of how other people have done it very successfully. Now let's look at, now we already know the loops or the channels. Now let's look at how do you improve on those, right? So let's look at the paid marketing group, right? So we are just zooming in a little bit more, trying to understand what is happening, right? So there I showed you 4 bubbles, right? So user clicks on the ad, percentage of them sign up, become paid customers, and then eventually you get more money, right? But ultimately, you are a product guy, right? Or you are an analytics guy, or you are a tech guy, and you understand that it's not just 4 steps, right? There are a bunch of steps involved, right? You click on an ad, you end up on the store page where you install, right? So you can definitely improve this install percentage. A percentage of then basically end up on your landing screen. Only a percentage of those will be able to successfully sign up and verify their phone numbers, get to a product detail page, add something to cart. Let's say you are an e-commerce company, right? Check out, make a payment, uh, complete the purchase, and only at this point of time you generate money to basically get money to basically buy more ads, right? So there are a lot of steps involved, and you can improve every step of this particular funnel, right? That's how we call it in product parlance, right? and once you improve this entire flow, right, obviously your efficiency improves and you are able to generate more money to fund your paid campaigns, right? So let's look at one bubble: percentage of users who install from your store page. Like what influences that, right? Make my trip example, right? Very standard now, it has become like the standard, but I just wanted to call out this example, right? What do you do? So let's say you have we know that app ratings is a big sort of draw for the user whether to decide whether to install an app or not. How do you improve your app ratings? So on the home page, let's say you have been using our app for some time, right? On the home page, we kind of give you this sort of what we call as a bottom sheet, right? So we give you this widget, right? If you if you rate us anything between 2 to 3 stars, right? The action I give you is basically provide feedback, which is an internal feedback that I consume, that why is it that you are not happy with my app. But if you are happy with my app, I change that action to basically say rate on Play Store. So the disgruntled user, I basically subsume him in within my own internal feedback mechanisms. Obviously I want to work on that feedback, improve my product. But if you are a happy user, I then basically use that opportunity to basically take you to Play Store and get you to rate my product on the store, right? And that is how basically you are able to improve your ratings on the store. Another example, more sort of an example that basically, like, you have to keep an eye on what is happening in the space, right? So if you are careful, you would know that Google basically launched an inline store rating widget, right? Because what happens in this kind of widget, you eventually, if you click on rate on Play Store, you actually have to go to the Play Store, and there also you again have to rate, right? So it's like a dual step process, and obviously every step behaves like a leaky bucket. So what we did on the thank you pages, right? And this is where like the smartness came in. So what we did, once you make a booking, right? You have made a successful flight booking or a hotel booking or whatever, right? Any line of business, any vertical, right? We know that you are a reasonably satisfied customer. You are pretty happy, right? Because you just completed a booking, right? You are happy. And in this particular case, we don't even want to use this custom widget, right? Because in this case, every step, like I said, acts as a leaky bucket. So we integrated this inline rating widget from Google. It's like you rate it here, you automatically the rating gets pushed to Play Store, right? And this not only helped us, I know for sure that this very likely I don't get to track, because obviously there's a Google widget. So obviously I don't get to know whether people are rating me 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, or whether they're rating me high, right? 4 star, 5 star. But I do know that you are in a happy place. It is very likely that you will rate me a 4 star or 5 star. So I'll put it here, and I'll increase the velocity of ratings that are getting published to the store, right? And that again helps me improve the ratings, right? So yeah, and that basically, once you improve the ratings, obviously the percentage of users who basically install your app from the store automatically starts increasing. Not only does Google start ranking you better in the organic listings, right, when the users searching for something, just the number of users, right? Because when they come to the store listing page, they decide that, hey, this is a 4.5 star rated app, let me go ahead and install it, right? So that's how we did it, right? Similarly, another, just calling out another representative step, how many users you are able to sort of get them to verify the phone number, right? So typical sort of global number, 10 to 40% drop at mobile phone verification step. How do you improve this step, right? Obviously, one way is basically get an OTP over a call, right? A lot of cases the SMS does not get delivered in time, right? So you should definitely have an option to basically get the OTP delivered over call. In Android use case, obviously a lot of, now everyone does this, but it used to be a novelty back then, right? Which is like auto read the SMS and basically populate it, right? If I had to give you an India first example, and if you want to get the phone number, WhatsApp has not enabled it, but until that time, obviously you can enable something which basically piggybacks on Truecaller, right? Because Truecaller has a massive user base in India, right? So if you have a login using Truecaller SDK, you know that it's a legit number, right? Because Truecaller already has that number. If I had to give you a US first example, there's something called carrier direct verification. Basically, get the phone number, you hit the carrier APIs. Let's say the user is a Sprint user or a T-Mobile user. So you hit T-Mobile's APIs, you ask them whether this is a genuine phone number or not. They tell you yes or no. You already know the carrier of the user because because on Android, on iOS, you have APIs to know what carrier the phone is, right? On what carrier the phone is. There are APIs on Android, iOS. You automatically hit that carrier's APIs, you get the verification done, right? So there's a partner called Danal in US that helps you do it, right? So instead of having an OTP-led kind of phone verification, you can have a carrier direct verification if you are building a product in the US, right? So these are some examples, right? This helps you plug the gaps in the steps, right? And then finally getting to another example, new user clicking on an ad. Once you get the user to click on an ad, it is your onus to get the user to convert. And here are some landing page examples. What is common amongst all these landing pages? Pretty much all of them look the same. There are some best practices on how the landing pages should look. Look at Instagram, Dropbox, Pinterest, LinkedIn. All of them pretty much look the same, right? So there's some guidelines. I have taken an Indian example. Here is an Indian example, a mapping startup in India called nextbillion.ai. If you look at their example also, looks very similar to how the others are, right? So there's a hero image, right? There is like directly a clear call to action on what the action needs to be done, right? Yeah, so minimal design with strong CTA, remove unnecessary form fields, rich media but no links, redirect to Play App Store when on mobile. On iOS, there's this construct called Smart App Banner, which directly takes you to the store, and make it very personalized, right? So if someone invited you, if let's say I invited Ashish, right? Then Ashish comes to the landing page should say, "Hey Ashish," right? So that he feels that is like really, really personalized for him, right? And don't be surprised. There's actually 80% drop off on landing pages. There's a real example. Actually, in the interest of sort of complete disclosure, my wife works for this startup. She actually started with a different version of the landing page. When she actually did this particular landing page, the conversion improved significantly. Like I actually know the numbers. I'm not at liberty to disclose them, but earlier they were getting practically zero conversions on their landing page. Once she shifted to something like this, their paid channels have actually started working because the leads, because people who are clicking on those ads are actually converted. uh, yeah. Yeah. So again, looking at what kind of other slices or data we should look at as PMs, as marketing guys, or as analytics guys, especially when it comes to paid. Obviously, you have to look at the channel split, right? So how many users are coming from direct, how many users are coming from search marketing, brand, right? Brand is basically your own keywords, right? So make my trip keyword, someone searching for make my trip keyword on Google, then search marketing, non-brand, SEO, and then one-off stuff like PR events, or maybe you're a SaaS company, you were very well received on Product Hunt, right? Or maybe so one-off events, right? So events, maybe you got covered by TechCrunch, right? So some of those things, right? So what do you really need to look at is like what kind of metrics you should look at. You should look at things by channel, and then how it is basically working out across different time periods or different slices. So thing that you need to look at is whether some channel you are able to grow sustainably. So for example, in this case, you had 8,000 maybe monthly uniques in March. You went to 9,500. You went to 11,000 in May. So that means there's at least one channel that is working sustainably for you. You're able to scale it. That means there's a good sort of there's a healthy mix of channels, and B, there's some channels that are showing decent signs of growth, right? So this is a good sort of state to be in. So you own a channel, right? So for example, in this case, SEM brand is a channel that you own, right? So people have started understanding your brand. They're looking for their brand directly, right? And it is at least flat or at least growing slowly. So that is a good sign. Good sign is like a channel scaling up, which is the case in this case. SEM non-brand is scaling up, and then a good healthy mix of channels. You shouldn't be overly reliant on one channel. You have a good healthy mix where some people are coming in direct through direct, some people are coming through your organic channels, which also seems to be scaling slowly but reasonably well. And then you have other paid channels that are working out pretty reasonably for you. The one-off channels don't work, right? So maybe you got featured on Product Hunt, you got 10,000 monthly uniques in 1 month, and then it will taper off as quickly, right? So that's one thing to keep an eye out. And the other thing is not just how many monthly uniques you are able to get in, but actually how many of these users you are actually able to convert to paying users, right? So how many of these users you were able to activate and then convert into an activated / paid user, right? So, and this is where the PM has control, right? So PM has control on activation percentages, like the slide I called out earlier, which was the D30 conversion. And the PM has a lot of control on even the channel through which you can drive downloads. Like, so SEO is something that obviously PM has a lot of control on. If you build good UGC loops in your product, or you have built good sort of CLM products, so you have given segmented notifications capability, or something of or some other, right, engagement tools within the app to your marketing sort of team. So those are things that help you sort of, or maybe you built a good referral loop, right? So those are things that help marketing team succeed, right? So acquisition qualities, again, like not only you need to look at acquisition breakdown in channels, you also need to look at acquisition quality, like how are those users, once they convert into downloads, how many of those users actually become paying users. And then obviously you have to look at cumulative growth rates of each of those channels, right? So the CGR is also important. So the acquisition bit is done, right? So let's move on to engagement, right? So we already covered new, right? And now we need to figure out how do you maintain a steady base of engaged users, and how do you reactivate. Actually, reactivation is kind of done. So how do you maintain a steady base of engaged users once you acquire a user, and hopefully grow that cohort over a period of time, right? Couple like 2 3 examples. Utility apps, right? If you are an app that is a regular usage app, how do you build sort of flows within in your product that, like, if you get engagement, how do you drive more engagement within the product, right? Social apps, very classic example. If I get one user, I should be able to get him to interact more and more with other users on the platform, and get engagement from the other users as well, right? And make the others sticky also. And then finally, uh, like notifications is a big sort of engagement channel, right, for the marketing team. Then the product team needs to pair it with good organic natural use cases, so that the notifications work better, or eventually the notifications can be not really supplanted, but basically you should build good sort of use cases, so that the notifications are relevant for the user, and once he clicks on those and comes onto your product, he finds stuff that is appealing or interesting to him, right? Let's look at examples. All social platforms, social feedback is a big sort of engagement queue, right? Why did Facebook put out likes, right? Or why is LinkedIn sort of trying out, why did LinkedIn put out reactions recently, right? Other kinds of reactions, not just likes, right? And how does that loop work, right? So user creates content, content is viewed by other users, people get feedback, right? So let's say I write out something on LinkedIn, it will be viewed by other users, other people will give me a lot of feedback, I will get a lot of uh, I'll get a lot of you know what, encouragement to basically put out more content, right? So the notification, and here is where the notification bit works beautifully, right? As soon as someone rates or feedbacks, I'll get a notification to creator, it acts as a lot of encouragement, I go and put out more content, right? uh, so very classic for all the different social networking platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. So social feedback is a big draw to drive engagement, obviously for social apps, which is what I called out in slide one. But it's not necessarily only for social, right? If you are smart, and I had to put in an India centric example, so I'll come to that, right? So people come, get to your product, right? And then basically, if specifically if I'm a content based player, right? So people come and basically subscribe to your product, so Netflix, right? And then basically I serve very personalized recommendations, and this is where the smartness as a PM comes in. You should be able to have as many data points on the user to be able to serve them very personalized content, be it something that they self declare, be it something based on their consumption pattern, be it something based on other sort of cues, right? So maybe the kind of device that he's on, right? I surface a lot of good personalized recommendations. Users get alerted by notifications, so notifications again becomes like a good vehicle to sort of deliver those recommendations. Users watch more content, they like the product, and then basically users subscribe, right? And user subscribe, think of it like something that is like that has a free plan as well as a paid plan, right? So you came in, you were probably on a free plan, I gave you very personalized recommendations, I alerted you with notifications, you watched more content, finally you were convinced that is worth upgrading to a paid plan, and you basically ended up on the paid plan, right? So Netflix, classic example, obviously everyone understands that, but I had to give you an Indian example that does it really well, which is IND Money. So IND Money is basically a personalized sort of, think of them as an app which basically is offering you investment advisory, right? and all kinds of products, right? So you have Indian stocks, you have Indian mutual funds, you have US stocks, you basically have PMSs, right? PMSs is basically like people who have a lot of money. So let's say if you have investable for 50 lakhs or more, you can get a very personalized portfolio management service, right? So PMSs, right? Then basically debt funds, all kinds of stuff, right? So what IND Money does pretty well, and yes, they're still an early startup, so but they do it pretty well, right? Which is you subscribe, right? And then they give you very relevant content based on your current portfolio. So they get you to disclose your portfolio. So they tell you that, hey, what are your life goals? Tell me your life goals and give me also all the kinds of investments you have done so far. You put in all that information, they use that. They basically give you more sort of personalized recommendations that, hey, maybe you are not on a you are on a regular mutual fund scheme, maybe you should move on to a direct scheme, right? Or maybe your mutual fund portfolio or stock portfolio at these stocks, and this is how the market moved today, and this is how your stocks are affected, right? And then they are using all of that information, right, to basically get you more and more hooked to platform, eventually to get you to basically sign up for their paid offering, which is IND, I think premium or IND gold, I forget the name, but that is what it is. Xylo, real estate, right? Xylo is actually a real estate player, but they have such a beautiful website, right? And they, like, even in real estate, they almost behave like Airbnb, right? So they give you very curated listings of very beautiful houses, right? You just spend time on Xylo just to look at houses, even if you cannot buy, just you are just there, right? And maybe you even end up signing up for for the paid plan, because you start getting more and more invested, right? So maybe you were looking at a house, they are a US company, so I'll give you an American example, right? So maybe you were looking, maybe your budget was only worth a house at the outskirts of San Francisco, right? Or maybe San Bruno, right? And then basically they're showing you such nice, beautiful options, and they understand your requirements really well, right? So they're giving you very good recommendations. Eventually you start looking at more expensive houses, right? Which means Xylo is able to make a better margin every time you buy or sell a house, right? So it's not just in pure content players, it is also like even real estate players which are like far away from content have been able to use content in a very good manner to basically drive ARPUs and engagements from the users. Yeah, so we looked at loops. Let's look at how do you improve these loops. So again, sort of zooming into the social feedback loop, right? User creates content, hits publish, it goes to all the connections, notifications for new content to the connections, they get clicked. Recipient, the notification recipient visits the website, gives feedback. This enables notification to the original content creator, that gets clicked. User views notification, feels very encouraged, again creates content, right? So again, if you zoom in, there's so many different steps, and you need to sort of plug in gaps at every step of this loop, right? So user creates content. Right. So giving you a Pinterest example, and this is a fairly dense slide, but I'll just sort of talk about a very small thing, right? So this is what Pinterest did some time back, which is like, as they realized that more and more of their users were coming from outside of the United States, when you used to come onto the app, they used to show you a bunch of sort of recommendations, right? And used to ask you to pin it, right? When you pin it, that is when the original guy who had created that card or who had created that board gets a notification that someone has pinned your content, right? And he feels encouraged. But what they realized, that as their user base more and more was shifting to outside of US, people didn't understand what does pin it mean, right? What is pin it, right? Pinning was such a US centric concept that they decided to change the name from pin it to save, right? To clarify the actual functionality of the button, particularly for international users. And just that changed the game for them, right? Uh, in our tests on the Pinterest button for browsers, changing pin it to save led to an 8% increase in pin saves. This is 8% absolute increase, and this is on a very big base, right? More than half of Pinterest 100 million monthly active users are outside of the US. So that difference was very, very significant. So just that, right? A new user comes in, he's able to find content, is able to save it for his own personal consumption, right? So once he has something bookmarked, obviously the utility of the platform increases for him. So you are able to activate new users and it also helps you sort of kick off that entire engagement loop that we talked about, right? That guy is saving it, more users are saving it successfully, which means the content creators get more encouragement and they publish more and more sort of cards and um, whatever they call it, boards, right? So this is how you sort of you look at every small detail, and you have to, especially grabbing the user early on is very, very important, right? When the user is first time coming to your product, right, app or website, getting that user to do a key action is very important. That is what I've called out. Activation shifts the cohort curve early. Like what will happen is, if you're not able to manage to engage the user in the first let's say 1 day, 2 days, 7 days, it is unlikely that you will be able to engage the user, right? So that the curve itself shifts very significantly. You have to grab the user right at the very beginning, right? And depending on the product, you are looking at D7 retention, D7 engagement, maybe you're looking at D5, maybe you're looking at D1, maybe you're looking at D30, but that is really, really important, right? So that, right? And then obviously some other tactical stuff. If you are on the mobile website, move you to the app so that I have more opportunity to engage you, because I have an open channel of communication through notifications, etc., etc., right? They even redesigned the homepage feed to make it look more like TikTok, right? And this is like, if something is successfully copy it, right? So Pinterest stepping up its efforts to lure creators to its platform, making its app a little more like TikTok, right? Because TikTok became a phenomena and people understand the TikTok structure really, really well. The creators understand it. So Pinterest shifted to the TikTok view, because it was, then creators understand it well. They're producing content for TikTok. Then it's not so much work to basically put it out on Pinterest as well, right? So Pinterest gets a lot more. If their format is different from the TikTok format, what will happen is the creator needs to publish one content for TikTok, and then the creator needs to publish another content for Pinterest, which means there is more friction, right? So some of those things. Number of connections, right? That is really important. In a lot of cases, you need to be able to sort of build this entire connection, right? So one guy to another guy, right? How do you do it, right? So you basically bootstrap, right? So let's say you're coming first time on LinkedIn, right? And you don't have any connections, but I really need you immediately start finding connections, right? So that you are able to derive value from the platform. So what do? LinkedIn does it. He says sync your contact information from Google, from Outlook, from phone contacts, right? Something that GoIBIBO also did very successfully. What they used, like I called out, uh, import your phone book. So GoIBIBO gets all your contacts, right? And then starts recommending you, right? That, hey, Ashish just joined and Anurag is already on GoIBIBO, right? So why don't you? So they will start recommending to Ashish that Anurag is already on GoIBIBO, right? Something like that, right? So something that Facebook does really, really well. So this is very important, right? Again, sort of piggybacking on an existing graph, be it your phone book, be it your Google contacts, right? And giving your user an incentive, some kind of incentive, right? So that they do that key information, so that they're able to get value out of your product, and they become more engaged and more sticky to your particular product, right? In LinkedIn's case, there is an organic sort of need, right? Because when you're coming to LinkedIn, you are looking to do professional networking, so you will end up maybe syncing your contact information because you want to find your professional networks. In GoIBIBO's case, they actually made it an instant mechanism, because there is no incentive for Anurag to basically share his phone contacts just for a travel app. So they made it instant based, but doing that basically just bootstrapped like a whole lot of growth for GoIBIBO, right? So, right. And then looking on to a subsequent sort of action. When users trying to re-engage, again, there are a bunch of things, right? So let's say when you're trying to reinstall the app, right? So maybe you have forgotten username, password, you're using a new phone number. So what do? You basically use the Google API, right? Which is the Android. On Android, you have the Android Smart Lock, which has all your usernames and passwords saved, right? So I have to make it very seamless for when I'm trying to re-engage an inactive user. I have to make it very seamless for the user to come back, find his username, password, and get back. And why is this very important? Because as you grow your base, like it called out in the beginning, your reactive user percentage will start growing very, very rapidly. Sorry, inactive user percentage will start growing very rapidly, because the more you grow, it is harder and harder to keep users engaged on your platform, right? So building a loop where you are, or at least not building a loop, but at least making sure the funnel when it comes to reactivation is really seamless for the user is super important. A lot of users forget this. So for example, Android smart lock, which is the example I've given. So if you come to the Make Matter app, it uses Android smart lock to basically show you all the different options, right? Use your username, passwords, and you just tap on it and it is a seamless login. And on iOS, you have iCloud keychain, right? Treat forget password as a key funnel, right? Or if you're trying to log in, right, I proactively send you out an email or a notification that looks like that you are trying to log in. If you have forgotten your password, click on the forgot password link, etc., etc., is really important so that you are able to successfully get the user back onto your product. And finally, how do you look at engagement? The way engagement metrics, exact the way we looked at activation metrics, you have to be smart in terms of how you are looking at the cohorts, right? So the standard cohorts, obviously you look at by platform. So on Android, what is the retention by week or month? On iOS, how is the retention? But you can do one better, right? How do you do it? So for example, in Hotstar, where I used to work earlier, we used to look at retention by content type, right? How are people who are looking at TV content? What is their retention vis-a-vis people who are looking at sports content, vis-a-vis people who are looking only at movies, versus people who are looking only at, let's say, small clips, right? And why is this important? Because then it gives you a lot of interesting sort of insights, right? So, for example, one of these smart cohorts that we had built, actually not very smart, but sort of an obvious cohort, is if there is a start lag in your video time, right? How much time it is taking for your video to start? What is your retention looking like, right? In a Hotstar, this is actual real Hotstar numbers. You see that uh, if your lag is less, or maybe the numbers are not very readable, your retention is actually much higher. If your lag is more, if you go to 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, your retention starts leaking very quickly. So how do you use it smartly as a product guy? You basically say that why should a user even wait to stream the video, right? Ask that fundamental question. Like, why does he have to wait every single time? I'll use smart downloads, right? If you're on a Wi-Fi connection, you're probably not on a metered connection. I'll immediately sort of download the content when you are Wi-Fi and make it always available, right? It's playing from your desk, right? So then there is no lag, right? And your retention will improve, right? Similarly, another retention example. So like I told you, I showed you the content example, right? So why wait only for like the feed or personalized content recommendations? You are already watching content and Hotstar runs a lot of ads, right? So I can use the ad spots which are going wasted in any case to show you other content recommendations, because not all my ad spots are filled, right? I have only so much advertising demand on my platform. So if you're watching some content, I can show you recommendations in the ad spot also, right? Use that smartly to basically get you more content and make it really smart. Not only am I giving you recommendations, I'm also giving you a customary. This is what Prime Video does very well. I give you a call to action then and there to add it to watch list, right? So again, that is where the smartness of the PM comes in, right? So recommendation, great. That was still like an obvious idea, like to use the ad spot to show a recommendation, but pairing it with a companion to basically add it to watch list then and there is probably one step smarter, right? Because now the user has a watch list, so I can send him a notification, and and I also know something more about this user, which basically helps me power more personalized recommendations for this user, right? And yeah, and then final topic I think is CLM. CLM basically, when I talk about CLM, I'm not just talking notifications, talking about emails and notifications. Either you do a beautiful job of the newsletter or make it very relevant sort of news, right? Topical news, right? So LinkedIn does it really well, right? So one of their emails is connections in the news, right? And I find it pretty interesting, right? Because if I hear about someone who is a connection and he's in the news, I'm typically curious and I'll click on that content and basically go back to LinkedIn, right? So that's like one good example from LinkedIn. Similarly, this is a house party example, but you can look at the clubhouse example also, right? So if Ashish is in a clubhouse speaking, or maybe he has joined a room, right? And if I get a notification that Ashish has joined a room, I'll be very interested in joining that room as well, right? So notifications are key to many engagement loops. Again, don't look at notifications just as a push example. Look at notifications, local notifications. Look at how you can use notifications as a key channel to basically deliver some of the recommendations to the user. But then ultimately, it is basically a topping, right? It's like the icing on the cake. It cannot be foundational, right? So it also depends on the platform, right? In travel case, it's very hard. In e-commerce case, it's very hard to do something like this until unless you have a genuine sort of content feed going on and basically show it to the user, right? So So yeah, so end of it, we have acquisition and engagement, right? Now we understand what are the components of acquisition, what are the components of engagement, right? Which grow into the growth accounting equation. Each of these things, if you do well, you will be able to sort of change the nature of the curve that I showed you right in the beginning. And then you also know exactly what is the sensitivity of those curves to each of those improvements that you're doing, right? Because you're doing some experiments, you're launching something, you know how much it is changing. Based on that, you'll be able to forecast when is it that you are going to peak out, or whether it is in the near future or whether it is sustainable. And that is how you will be able to sort of get a very good comprehensive understanding of growth. So this is where I would end. I have done a lot of speaking. So hopefully I was making sense all along, but yeah, thank you so much guys for like being very sort of patient participants.
Thanks, Anurag. This was really like fairly comprehensive. I think from acquisition to retention to re-engagement to engagement. I think this was really a 360-degree coverage. At this point, I'll just ask if there is any, even though I think it was very, very easy to understand, at least I found it to be very simple in its understanding. But maybe other people have more comments and questions. If you have any, please feel free to ask them now.
I think I already spoke a lot. People are already tired. They're like, let us go now. It's enough.
Yeah, Friday evening, Christmas Eve is calling.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Cool. I don't, if we do not have any questions, then I think
Maybe there's something came up on chat. No, that's fine.
that was one question I had responded
Yeah,
to.
okay.
Cool. All right. I think that's that. Anurag, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
This was
same
really
here.
a 360-degree view as promised. So this deck, if you can share with us, that
Yeah,
would be great.
definitely. I'll share it.
I'd love to share it internally. I think, yeah, somebody's writing examples were very useful. I think, yeah, I agree that the examples were the highlight for me as well. Like I learned so much about so many different products and what they are trying to do. So thank you so much for taking out time, man.
Welcome.
Cool. All right. Have a great weekend ahead. Thank you everyone for who joined
Thank you
in.
everyone for like
Thank
staying
you.
back. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Anurag. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anurag. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Ashish.
Bye. Bye, sir.